Gene Hammett, after 9.5 years, welcome back to the Sales Podcast. How the heck are you?
I'm doing fantastic, Wes. How are you?
I'm good. January 26, 2015, we talked about you bouncing back from $2.9 million in debt. Do you remember that?
It wasn't debt so much as I lost the money by giving it to someone else.
Yeah. That stings, huh?
It does. I got a little bit of a redemption a couple of years ago. I was invited to the sentencing for the guy who took my money.
Oh, nice.
And he's doing 17.5 years.
Oh, dude, that rarely happens. So kudos.
Yeah, he kept scamming people, and it caught up with him. And I got to be there for sentencing day.
So is that the foundation of this new book now? How to have tough conversations?
That wasn't the foundation. It was definitely part of my life that transformed me. And I can spin this into it was the worst thing that ever happened to me, but looking back at it, and again, it's been since 2010 that this happened. My life is completely better and transformed. I feel more connected to what I'm doing, my wife, as a husband, as a father. I'm just a better person because I went through that. And I know that it's sometimes happens for people. It doesn't always, but I've chosen to make that hardship in my life something that happened for me, not to me.
Yeah. Yep, that is rough. I have been taken for money, not 2.9 million, but well into the six figures through various deals over the years. And yeah, I mean, you either get bitter and lose hope, or you're like, well, I need to toughen up and become a little smarter, trust myself a little more,
and hopefully not make the same mistakes.
Yeah. Yep.
But so now it was a good experience for me. If I looking back, I know that sounds crazy, losing that much money, losing the business, losing the house, losing my sense of confidence. But it did send me in a new path to be the coach, run this current business I'm running with, leadership development, building a team. I just feel so connected to the work that we're doing and the impact we're making. I know this is where I'm supposed to be.
Yeah. And so you wrote this book with your wife, so that's unique. I have had a few. My the first podcast ever was with a couple. I did sales training, David and Marnell Hibbard, and I've had several spouses on. So how did that come about? Is your wife in the business with you? Does she do training and consulting?
Yeah, there's a story behind this that I'll share with you and the audience. This wasn't the book we set out to write. And this is a common thing, but I set out to write a book about leadership because a lot of my clients were struggling with, hey, I need not just managers in my people. I don't need just good performers. I need real leaders because we're going through some challenges, and we need people that are adaptable and innovate, driving innovation. And so we ended up sitting down to write a book the working title was Help, I Need Leaders. And we put all the stuff that we could into it. Me and my wife had been doing, leadership development for a few years with a lot of companies, primarily work with fast growth companies because they're in a dose of chaos and they're able to hire people. They have, good retention numbers, but a lot of people get promoted too soon and they don't have the skills to really develop the people around them. So we've been doing that for companies for a few years, and we're going to write the book on it. We wrote the first draft, and first drafts are really easy. I mean, I feel like it's like walking on water. You're just getting your ideas out. You've got an outline. It just flows for me. It wasn't so easy for my wife, but we ended up writing that book. And I step back looking at the first draft and go, it's too long. It's too much. We're trying to pack into one book. It should be a series of books. And Todd Herman, which you probably know Todd, and he was one of my coaches, and we were just chatting about it. And he's like, well, which chapter in this book that you just wrote is the most important chapter? And we discussed a couple of different angles. And I was like, I think it's the one on the tough conversations. And he's like, Tell me about it. Why is it needed? And all that stuff. And I left that call going, oh, I've got to have a tough conversation with my wife because we just wrote a book. First drafts, not a finished product, but a first draft. And I said, I think we're going to take chapter 18 and turn it into the next book. I gave her a 2-sentence explanation. I didn't have to explain a lot. And she goes, that makes a lot of sense. Let's do that. It wasn't as hard as I thought. So that's kind of the background of how this book was originally born.
So what does this mean? Leadership training. I see that a lot. And I'm a little confused by it, honestly. I mean, I come from the military.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just show up and take charge. And I've sat through some bad training. And the boss is, hey, we're going to do this new thing. And it's like, that dude, it's like, we're giving a 747, to a teenager that can't even drive. Like, this isn't going to help, so
yeah.
How does this work?
Yeah, most leadership training probably doesn't work the way we intend it to. I think the reason behind that is because it's based on theory or it's based on principles, which are important. But it comes down to, are they willing to apply the work? So if you take Tough Conversations is one of the key modules inside of our leadership development program that we work with companies on. And we ended up writing the book around it because it was just such an important piece of it. But a lot of people are afraid to have those tough conversations, so they're not. They even learn this from their CEOs. A lot of CEOs are avoidant of these moments, either because they want to be liked, or they just don't know how to do it well, or they don't know if it's their job. It's confusing to them. But we take the leadership development and actually get them not just to understand the concepts, but like, okay, now go out into your team and let's identify 2 or 3 missing conversations that haven't happened yet and start doing it. And once we get that, Wes, people start doing it, you know what it's like. I mean, you've done jiu-jitsu. It wasn't always easy, but you keep going back and you keep refining those skills. You keep doing it.
You mean it gets easy? It does get easy?
It gets easier. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I haven't reached that point
get
yet.
easier. Jiu-jitsu gets easier. I'm sure at the level you're playing now, you're still a brown belt, right?
Yeah.
You're still brown, right? Yeah. You'll get there. You keep working.
I should be blue. I should be blue. I think he just takes pity on me for being old. He just gives me promotions.
My instructor took the opposite approach, but I was a purple belt for about 9 years, I think.
Oh my God.
I got to purple pretty fast. I think I was in purple at 3 years or maybe 4 years. And then it just slowed down for me. Now I took some breaks and all that stuff, but it does get easier. And so back to the leadership development thing, we get them not just to learn this, but we actually get them to do it. We get them to reflect on doing it. And then, what eventually comes back is, oh, that was much easier than I thought. I'm glad I learned, kind of how to do it. And now there's less resistance. And if you take leadership and break it up into skills, just like you do jiu-jitsu, I mean, at one point in time, my instructor said, your guard sucks. And that's embarrassing for your instructor to say that when you're a purple belt or even a brown belt. And you're like, okay, I got to work on my guard. So you start working on the weaknesses of the game in order to be better. In leadership, we teach those skills that are, sometimes weaknesses, and we bring them up because I don't think you can just focus on what you're good at in leadership.
Sure.
In some areas of business, absolutely. If you're great at sales, focus on sales. If you're great at developing like coding and things like that, or marketing, you can focus on those things and play to your strengths. But in leadership, if you're a terrible listener, there's only so far you're going to be able to go as a leader. You've got to shore up those weak skills.
What'd you say?
Classic Wes.
Joke. I can't help myself, man.
So my wife is hard. It is based on skills to me. You teach those foundational skills and then you put them into play. You put them into action and you go through the cycles of leadership. And my favorite result that has come out of any of the leadership development we've done is one of the kids that was going through our program. It's like 8 weeks or something. At the end of the 8 weeks, we do a celebration class where they can share what they've learned, how they're using it within their teams. And he goes, I figured something out. And I said, what is it? He goes, I thought my job was to be the MVP of the team. And maybe it was for a few years. But as I became a manager, I realized my job is to make others the MVP. And if we had that happening inside of organizations consistently, repeatedly, we would be in a different place because we would be able to focus on bigger aspects of growth of our businesses. And we would have those around us taking care of not just the business, but developing the people around them, because it takes both of those things to create the kinds of companies that I work with. I mean, my clients are, 10 million, 20 million, 100 million even and beyond. They don't get to that place unless they are building up the people around them.
Well, my clients are at 12 trillion. Okay. So, so there.
Of course.
So who brings you in, right? I mean, lower level folks can't, I would imagine, because it's like, hey, our boss is not a good leader. Like, do bosses recognize like, oh man, I'm sucking, or do they think, well, I'm just so good and I'm doing my thing and I'm going to be a benevolent dictator and bring someone in to help others learn how they can be glorious like me? I mean, what's the dynamics here? Because I remember being at I was at March Air Force Base. Yeah, March Air Force Base, 93. So late 90, 92, 93, I think. So late 94, early 95. And then we were doing TQM, Total Quality Man. And I remember, and I'm just full of piss and vinegar, 24-year-old, like, what the hell? And I'm like, this ain't going to work because leadership won't accept this. They're supposed to push the decisions down, let the assembly line workers stop the whole assembly line because one little widget they notice isn't up to snuff. I'm like, okay, this ain't gonna happen. And it didn't, but it looked good on paper, so who brings you in? What's that look like?
Honestly, it's still the CEOs of the company. I'm not working with what I would call enterprise. They're not Fortune, 500 or 1,000 level companies, and they don't have, 4,000 employees, and they've delegated everything out to someone else. So I'm still working with companies that might have 50 employees, 100, 200, 500.
Sure.
It's kind of on the top side. And so I'm talking to CEOs, and we talk about, some of the challenges they're facing. A lot of CEOs are not sure how their role evolves as the company continues to scale. If you get stuck in that founder mentality, it's hard to let go to actually to be a CEO of a company. The founders think they need to go to every meeting and be there to drive things forward. And at a point in time, they do need to, but as they get bigger, they can't go and be a part of that. They become the bottleneck. And so the CEOs are the ones who typically hire us. Some of the bigger organizations, I was talking to someone the other day, 450 employees. He's got a chief human resources officer, so a CHRO, and her task is to make sure that leadership development is something that they really have a good handle on. And so sometimes it gets delegated out to someone like that, but typically it's the CEO is the one that's making that decision that we're going to do some type of leadership development.
So these tough conversations, I got to imagine a lot of times, I mean, what do they say? A fish rots from the head down, right? Are there some really tough conversations, like people going, okay, so the gloves are off. This is a safe space. We can speak freely. It's like, hey, boss, you're a jerk. It's like, I've told you for 6 months, for 6 years, we've got to fix this. And, and you're too oppressive. You're a dictator, blah, blah, blah. You won't delegate. I mean, how does that go over?
So if it goes over the way you framed it, probably not so well. One of the things that it is a real thing, and I call this leading up, right? So if you're a director of sales or marketing or whatever it may be, and you've got someone above you, could be the CEO, it could be a VP of something, and they're being the jerk. If you come in kind of just really candid and don't have any kind of permission to do that, or you're not doing it in a respectful way, it's probably not going to go the way you want to. But I will share a little story with you. I'm sure you're familiar with Ray Dalio. He wrote the book Principles. And one of the stories from his experience was we want to make sure that everyone has a high level of transparency. And that transparency, he calls it radical transparency. And I wrote about it for Inc. magazine. It was one of the #1 articles I wrote years ago. But he's like, in one instance, one of the junior employees left the meeting and we jumped on the elevator together. And the junior employee says, "Hey, I'm just curious, like, could I give you some feedback on the meeting?" And he's like, "Sure." And he's like, "You weren't prepared today, were you?" This is to the CEO of the company. And he's like, "Well, today was a little bit rough. I was going from meeting to meeting." And he goes, "But you expect us to be prepared. And I'm just letting you know, it was very clear to me and probably everyone else in the room that you didn't know what you're talking about today."
So the employee said that to the CEO.
Yeah. Would you welcome that in your team if they did it respectfully and nicely?
For sure. Well, it's the old adage, praise in public, criticize in private. If it's truly private and it's honest feedback, yeah, bring it on. But I bet it stings. It stings most people.
It stings. Like, it probably stung him. Like, oh yeah, I pride myself. I do expect you as an employee to be prepared. I should lead by example. That's probably one thing that you've learned from the Air Force and the military, and it's carried through you as a husband of how many kids? 19?
37, 19, 7, I don't know, something like that.
It's changing all the time, especially as grandkids keep popping up.
Yeah, third grandkids coming next 2 weeks.
So it is something, leading by example is a real thing. And if you're not willing to stand in the fire of feedback from a junior employee, and that's triggering to you, or that causes you to get upset or lash out or be a jerk, be oppressive, use your authority the wrong way, control things, it's not a good experience. And then they'll actually, filter through the organization. But the point behind this is, yes, we do have to lead up from time to time. I encourage you. There's some lessons inside the book. It's not the core of the book about leading up. The core of the book is about just making sure that you understand avoidance is common. And we'll go into some of the details later. But just as far as leading up, do it respectfully, do it kindly, and don't expect things to change immediately. But just really being able to, maybe you ask permissions, like, "Hey, can I give you some feedback on this?" Because that was part of the example I gave you with Ray Dalio. I think every CEO at least will say it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now in private, or do they feel a little bit shamed about it? Probably, but that's okay too.
Yeah.
When you tell an employee he wasn't prepared for the meeting, he feels bad. He feels a little shameful. And he's like, "You know what? I need to get a handle of this. I need to make sure that I know that I'm prepared for these meetings." That's just one example. There's a million different types of tough conversations. But in your question, leading up is necessary and is required for organizations to create a culture where this is okay to have these tough conversations.
When are people typically bringing you in? Is it when there are issues and they've got to fix them because it's bad, or are they firing on all cylinders and like, we want to get even better?
I think there's some issues. I'm typically work with fast growth companies. So there's a dose of chaos that's always happening, and they're driving for something more than just complacency, right? I've never had a client go, "Yeah, 8% growth a year is okay." Which it is okay. And maybe this year they would take that in some cases, because it's been a tough year for a lot of businesses. But
oh, come on, man. The government says we have a booming economy.
I'm feeling the pressure. I don't know how you are, but I think people are delaying decisions, and I'm being as patient as I can.
I think they said that 2 quarters in a row, I think, of declines.
Yeah.
So even McDonald's. So yeah, something's going on.
But the point behind this, they're bringing us in because maybe it's not as easy as it used to be. Maybe they keep trying to do the same thing that he's always done, that they're not getting the results. And CEOs will hire an executive coach mainly because they realize, I've never been at this level before. I could use some insight. I could use someone to talk to. The thing that it's lonely at the top, very true. A lot of CEOs can't vent to their board, can't vent to their executive team. Their wife's tired of hearing the vents. So they need someone to talk through and maybe even look at fresh perspectives or new approaches to these things. That's what I do at the CEO level. But at the leadership development, when we're working inside organizations trying to create leadership at all levels, they're bringing us in mainly because they're probably feeling some issues of managers aren't prepared. It may not be turnover, but that's part of the thing. It's just they don't have the skills and the cycles of leadership to be the leaders that they need them to be in the organization. And there's a leadership gap. A lot of my companies will have, the executive team will have 20 plus years average experience. Great. The managers will have 6 months. You can imagine the gap of skills and confidence if you have 20 years versus 6 months. And so we come in and really just plug in. It's kind of a turnkey leadership development, coaching managers, private coaching. We give them training as well. So, but I don't think training alone works. And I really don't think giving someone access to a set of videos and say, go do it on your own time, that to me is just a waste of money. You just might as well light it on fire and burn it.
Yeah.
Because people don't do it.
I see that personally. I mean, the programs I've signed up for, the training, and it's like, hey, here's all these videos, all these Google Docs. It's like, okay, that's wonderful. It's like, I need to speak to somebody. Like, cut to the chase for me, right? Help me understand, connect the dots, see the big picture, blah, blah, blah. So I know, what steps to take. And so, yeah. And you see it all the time, but wait, there's more. You're going to get, 1,000 hours of recordings of.
At this point, it's probably red flag for both of us. If it's like 17 extra hours of, I'm like, no.
Yeah. I tell people it's like going to the dentist, they charge, $2,000, to pull your tooth, and it took 30 seconds. You're like, I can't believe it's $2,000. What do you say? I can drag it out for 2 days if you want me to earn my money, No. It's like
That's a good
doing
analogy.
This quickly is a benefit.
Yeah. Not that this is an exact line of this, but there's something that I struggle with, and I'll just say it to you, Wes. A lot of my peers have created group coaching programs. They've created, and the group can be better, but for some reason, the kind of clients I have, the CEOs I'm working with, they are in groups, but they're not coaching groups. They're like EO or YPO or something like that. When they come to work with me, they want private attention. They want a 30-minute call. They want to get their stuff out. They want to say what they need to say. They want to feel heard. And then they were looking for a different perspective or a different way to move forward. And they want to do it in 30 minutes, maybe an hour sometimes, and they're done. They don't have to listen to anybody else's story and anyone else's stuff. They just want to get their own thing fixed and move forward. And that's probably where I am with my coaching experience. I'm not looking to be in a group thing. I just want what I want and get it and move.
Yeah. And some things are fine for a group, but some things it's like, let's talk. But all the internet bros, man, you can't scale doing 101. You're trading your time for dollars, and you got to be on the beach with a laptop. And
it is a limiter to my business, and I have felt it, and I have worked myself to the point of burnout from time to time.
Yep.
I also have figured out I can hire other coaches to support me. And so in order for me to be able to coach, 250 managers last year, I had other coaches do that, and it worked out pretty damn well. And we did private coaching with those coaches, with those managers, and we did training. We had facilitated sessions. It's kind of a whole experience to really get them to accept this new learning and to apply it to their work. And it wasn't done by me. So yes, we can hire coaches that will make an impact for our businesses. And I'm not trading time for money. I'm being the CEO of this coaching leadership development company.
And do the clients mind? Like, how do you sell that? Because, I want you, Gene. You're just going to hand me off to somebody?
Full transparency, it works really well at the lower levels. The higher up in the levels, if you go to the VPs and the C-suite, a little bit harder. They'd like to have me, but I have been able to do that very easily. The CEOs, I haven't let go of that yet. I'm still the one that's working side by side with the CEOs, but I will tell you right now, part of the growth plans is to bring in someone else that can coach CEOs, because we're getting to the point where I can't add more clients. And so I either create a waiting list, or I give you an option to work with someone that might be 30% cheaper than me. And as long as I'm, watching over these things and truly making sure that they understand how to use our tools, because we've, over the last dozen years, we've developed some really unique tools that get to the heart of things. Like this Tough Conversations framework is one of those tools that it's taken us 5-6 years to do it. We want to make sure that all those coaches know the tools and know how to use them, when to use them. And that's just part of us scaling that business to making sure they know how to do the things that we do.
Yeah. Cool. So on these, these tough conversations, like, what does it look like? Who's reaching out? Like, is the CEO like secretly, calling from home? I don't want anybody to hear, but I need some help. Or are they getting their assistant? Hey, find me a coach, or like,
yeah.
How does that happen?
The CEO, the tough conversation typically starts with a workshop. And it's really interesting because I do a lot of research in order to do this. I have my podcast, Grow Think Tank, had it for over 10 years, 1,100 episodes. A lot of the conversation I have were just CEOs. And we'll talk about some of the places where they struggle. And if I ask them, and I've done this, rate yourself from 1 to 10 on your ability to either not avoid a tough conversation opportunity, and you were able to do it effectively to the point where it actually makes change in behavior. What's your rating? Average is 6.7. Okay. So in my world, that's a D.
Yeah.
And they realize that that's a D. Now, the same people rated their managers at 5.1 out of 10. That's failing. And so many times they want the help, but they also know that the younger generation who would rather text it than talk about it needs to have more communication skills. And I know you're right there beside me in this because I'm not alone. You probably would rather talk to someone than only text, but they don't want to
Depends on the person.
They don't want to get on Zoom and talk to anyone. They just they want to be passive and work their little thing. And they're going to avoid those conversations when they can. And so companies bring us in either to do a workshop or to read a book, facilitate a true session of how to actually understand tough conversations and how to use the frameworks inside the book. And then it's also in our coaching program. So if you work with us for, 8 weeks or 12 months, you're going to get a heavy dose of the skill of tough conversations.
Yeah. Cool. So somebody brings you in, they just know in general they can do better. And then from there, additional projects or consulting or coaching.
We do live by the land and expand.
Yeah.
My best customers have been with me for 4+ years.
Nice.
They've grown at 3-4x in revenue. Growing from 4 million to 17 million isn't that easy, but I've got a number of clients that have done this with me over the years, and we're working not just at the CEO level. We're working with executives, VPs, directors, managers. So that's the examples of our best customers. Working with a CEO, it works, but it's not the full picture. It's almost like in a sales training. Let's get one person the right training. Everyone else is on their own. That just doesn't work that well.
Yeah. Cool. So what's the plan for the book? Because I got to imagine would you say, in a way, you've been basically doing this all along and now you finally codified it? Is that accurate, or is it making it more accessible for everyone in this format?
When I decided, I told you the story about writing a book and then realizing it was not the right book for the first thing we did. So we took chapter 18 and turned it into the book. It really was an exercise of me thinking about, most of my executive coaching clients will come to me complaining about an employee, complaining about maybe it's quality of work, maybe it's a trust issue, maybe it's an attitude. It could be like passive aggressiveness. It's usually pretty serious things. And we will talk about those things, and I will come up with this is where it started. I would listen to them, let them vent, because that's part of the process. And then I will stop them before it goes on too long, and they're just, in a pile of tears, which doesn't happen that much because I work mostly with men, but they're pretty stoic about that. But they will get to the point where I have to ask my turning point question, which is, what is the missing conversation that hasn't happened yet? So I've been asking this question for 8-10 years, and that gets them to change from being a victim of this person's poor behavior or poor attitude to, all right, what are we going to do about it?
Mm-hmm.
And that missing conversation that hasn't happened yet, I think it's chapter 7 in the book, is one of the most powerful questions. I call it the magic question. and everyone can take this and apply it in their life. You've got 3 people you work with or 17, write their names down and literally write, what's the missing conversation I haven't had yet? I mean, this may sound silly. I had a CEO one time go, yeah, one of the guys on the team is got really bad grammar and spelling issues, but he does all the PowerPoints for the company. And I go, oh, well, what happens when you told him that his grammar's not up to snuff? And he's like, oh, I've never told him. So what do you do? And he goes, oh, I just fix it for him.
Oh,
I said, so he literally doesn't even know he has a problem. It's a blind spot. He goes, yeah, I guess so. I go, don't you owe it to this kid or this man or whoever, this woman to lift them up and say, you've got to be more careful, because they're probably sending emails and all this stuff with bad grammar and no one's willing to tell them, like, are you okay with that as a leader? And the answer is no, we're not.
no.
I hope. So that's kind of, it starts there with that missing conversation. And then we ended up having this happen so often. Me and my wife, I sat down, we have she has an office on the other side of the house. And we sat down on the couch and we said, we need a framework. Is there another book out there that has a framework? And we looked at Radical Candor, and we looked at Crucial Conversations, and we looked at some of the other difficult conversation books. What they call frameworks and what we call frameworks are different. I want a framework that's step by step that allows me to understand where the breakdown is. And so we fashioned it in about 90 minutes, just talking it through. We put it into a document, and we've been giving that out for about 5 or 6 years before we wrote the book, to use it to help people to understand, here's the core elements, here's what's missing, here's how you do this. And there's some new things in there. There's some things that are just, one of the things is you've got to listen. And we talk about listening beyond the words. And so we put that framework together 5, 6 years ago, been using it, and it's been received very well. It's been a big part of our leadership development. And then when we finally got, about a year ago, we got really committed and said, we're going to write the book. And so here it is today.
Woohoo! Very nice. So what do you want people to do? You want to buy the book? You want to call you? You want to read the book first, then call you?
I mean, the simplest thing to do is buy the book, right? If you prefer to do digital or print or Audible, they're all available at this point. Amazon. If you don't want to buy the book.
Did you do the Audible part?
I did the Audible. Well, I did it with my wife.
Oh, yeah.
And then our team did the editing behind it. So that's not fun. Have you done that yet?
No, I've heard it's not fun.
Our brains don't slow down enough to read every word. So you skip words. And so we had to go back and re-record some things. And it may not be perfect, but I will tell you, we tried to make it fun. We added some extra elements into the Audible if people are like that, behind the scenes kind of stuff. It's only about 5 hours. I mean, the book is pretty thin. It's about 140 pages if you look at it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not a heavy lift. You can probably read it between my house and yours. I live in Atlanta. I know you're in California. On a quick
flying,
flight.
Driving, walking, what?
A flight. Let's go with a flight today.
All right.
So it's a quick read, and if someone doesn't want to buy the book, I would say go buy the resources, or download the resources, and give the URL if you want me to. But I want people to use it. I don't care about the book. I don't make money, that much money in the books. I just want people to stop avoiding the tough conversations and be able to have that kid that doesn't have the grammar. Isn't that kind of sad that you didn't have the courage to tell the kid to work on his grammar?
Mm-hmm.
I know when my first job, you're talking about being 24, I was an engineer, and I worked with another engineer, and I was expected to write a lot. And we did a lot of research. I was in management consulting, and we did strategy work for big companies. She's like, you write like an engineer. And I kind of smiled, and she goes, that is not a compliment.
That's not good.
I took your course on writing the drunk email. And that's a lot of fun to be able to write that, because it's using humor. It's using, a little bit of personality.
Obviously, you have to know your audience, right? If you're an attorney writing a brief, to get your client off death row, it probably needs to be pretty specific.
It's got to be much more like an engineer, probably.
Yes.
Or an attorney.
Yes.
But my point is, when I was 24 years old, so that was 30 years ago, because I'm almost 54. Someone changed my life by the willing to tell me, they didn't use the structure in the book. She was pretty blunt about it, but it woke me up. Do I look bad at someone who woke me up? No, I look at them with, honor and just really proud that I was able to listen to that. And I started working on my writing and I got better. I got better on those weaknesses because I had to do that. I wanted to be able to write efficiently. And I ended up writing articles, when I was 24 years old in magazines, and we wrote books for the business. I mean, they were not things you would buy on Amazon. They were all electric utility research based. I was writing a good bit, and it prepared me to write not only these books, but I wrote for Inc. magazine for 2 years, wrote 150 articles on leadership. So I got better at writing because someone years ago said, hey, you need to work on this.
Yeah.
My hope is that people, what would they take away from this conversation? If there's a missing conversation you haven't had yet with someone in your team, it could be your wife, it could be your kid, because tough conversations are everywhere, but be willing, have the courage to have that conversation and do it in a way that isn't, you're not going to come in like a sledgehammer. You're going to come in with a dose of curiosity and connect with that person, listen to them, and then decide how you move forward together. So if someone's got bad grammar, it's much easier to talk about than someone who's passive aggressive. You can point to bad grammar and say, this isn't right. See the little squiggly line that comes under this? But passive aggressive is hard to point to. So you might start with the very definable tough conversations, and then you work your way up to some of the more personal ones.
But how does that happen? How does somebody tolerate that kind of mistake, inefficiency? I mean, that kind of hurts my head.
Yeah. To rework something that someone else should have done right the first time.
Yeah. But to put up with that all the time, because like I always tell this story, we've got 7 kids and, 5 are out of the house now. So the dynamics are changing, but we had all 7 under one roof, for years. And we have a chore list, it's on a whiteboard. And it would rotate every week, and it just shifts down, right? Counters, floors, dishes, laundry, whatever. It goes right down. And my wife one time, because like I'll go sit on the couch, she can't stop until everything's done. So she'll be in the kitchen doing the chores. And I'm like, what are you doing? Let the kids do it. Right. So we would have this conversation, go back and forth. But at one time she's like, I don't even know why I tell you, ask you for, to do something. You'll just tell the kids to do it. And I'm like, yeah. Okay. A, they made the mess. B, we need time together. C, they need to learn how to be responsible and do their work. Like this is parenting. This is leadership. Right. And so she's gotten much better on that. So I can't imagine somebody like, hey, your job is to do A, B, and C, and they do A, B, and C wrong every time. Like, okay, let me just fix it for you. Like, yeah. Oh, the dishes are done. Okay, thanks everybody. And I go down, and the dishes, aren't done. Okay, I'll just do the dishes. It'll only take a minute.
Yeah.
And you got 9 people in the house and everything. Because I would tell my kids that it's like, we're running around to pick them up, and from a friend's house, and I would say, be outside, standing on the curb like we are robbing a bank, jump your ass in the car. And they would never get it, right? But it's like we're running around and literally have to pick up 3 kids. And I'm like, you don't understand. When y'all take 5 minutes to say goodbye, and I do this 3 times, that's 15 minutes. But that's 15 minutes every single day, right? After we're making a round trip, A, to drop all of you off, and B, to pick you up. So it's not just 15 minutes there. We just spent 2 hours dropping you off and then picking you up. So 15 minutes, we can do the dishes. In 15 minutes, you can vacuum the floors. In 15 minutes, you can get your laundry started. And they slowly would start to get it, right? And so how does this guy tolerate that for so long? It hurts my soul.
It does. And I can relate to you because my wife's the same way. We only have one kid, Wes. He's older. He's like 17. And she's thinking about the empty nester thing. And we've let him fly to different places by himself, which maybe some parents wouldn't do that. But to us, I really lean on everything that he's doing at this age is preparing him to be independent.
Yes.
And the chores are one of the things. She'll jump in and do the dishes for him, because that's really the only thing we ask him to do, is to do the dishes every night. And it probably takes 3 to 4 minutes. And wipe the counter.
For 3 people. Yeah.
And if she does, I said, if you do it for him, when does he learn to do it? Well, he didn't do it. And I'm like, but if he knows that you will come in behind him. Have you ever seen that comedy skit where the guy and the girl, I guess they're like girlfriend, boyfriend, and she goes, what are you doing? He goes, I'm picking up the pizza boxes. It's like, you know what? If you just leave it there, it'll just magically be gone in the morning. And she looks at him with this disdain, like, what are you talking about? She's like, no, same thing with the dishes. You just leave them in the sink, they get put away. And obviously it's satire, but if you do the chores for your kids, they'll never learn to do them for themselves.
Yeah.
But in business, if you do the work of your employees, they'll never learn to do it. If you make the decisions for each one of your employees, they'll never learn to make the decisions. And one of my pastors has this saying, I don't know if you know Andy Stanley. You know Andy? Mega church here in Atlanta. It's pretty big. He's a great communicator. And he goes, if you make the decisions for all your employees and all the people in your life, you'll be surrounded by people that are not willing to make decisions. And same thing with tough conversations. If you jump in and try to fix things that other people should be fixing, instead of giving them the skills and giving them the book and saying, here, live this book, and then let's talk about it. I want you to be able to have that tough conversation with someone on your team, because we can't tolerate this going on.
Right. But why was that guy tolerating it? Was it like a family member? Was it like some old employee who was just being nice?
And I will tell you, because I do private coaching with people, I don't want to break confidence, so I won't tell you.
Sure.
But I asked questions around this. It was actually a different thing. He had a VP of sales, so you can relate to this quite often. The $23 million company, and after COVID actually really was a driver for them. But then a couple of years into COVID, all of that spending had gone away because they were selling to hospitals certain things. And they were back down to about 14 million, which isn't good, right? You're going backwards. And again, there was a need in COVID for their product specifically. And so he asked for the VP of sales to give him a new sales strategy. So the next week, he's expecting to be able to review the new sales strategy. And the guy brings him how many meetings and the key KPIs for the bit. And he goes, this is not the sales strategy. Next week, bring the sales strategy.
Right.
He goes, okay. And he brings him something else. He brings him the email list that he's going to, send out for this. No, we're not looking at that. He goes, the next week, it's the target list. 4 weeks into it, I'm still coaching with the guy. And I go, so you've done this for 4 weeks? He goes, well, if I'm really honest, it's been 6 weeks. And I go, how much time do you give him to figure this out? Same guy. But what we realized was he would prefer to be liked than to be a leader. And that's a dangerous place, because in leadership, if you sway toward, I'm afraid to do that. I want to be really kind to people, and that's too harsh.
Yeah.
You can't lead effectively. And so the reason why he didn't talk to the kid about the grammar and the spelling and the PowerPoints is because he preferred to be liked. And he's like, it only takes me 3 or 4 minutes to fix it. Yes. But when does he understand that he's got a problem and that he needs to fix it himself? You're not doing him any favors. And he goes, you're right. Absolutely. So the voice of reason as the coach sometimes is so clear to us because we're not emotionally involved, and they've got a reason and justification. But that's one reason why they need coaches, is because we're not emotionally involved.
Yeah. You need that neutral third party. And like raising kids, it's you have to let them fall. Yeah.
It's hard.
There's a guy, oh my gosh, is it Jordan Peterson maybe? It talks about like don't talk to or don't distract a kid on a skateboard. He's like, let them ride. They're going to hit a rock. They're going to fall. Yeah, they might bang their elbow, their knee. Okay, then they'll learn to put knee pads on. But they're out there exploring, and raising kids. Like, our 2 little grandsons are walking, and, they fall. And our first one, poor kid, like, he never crawled, literally still doesn't crawl. He's a year old, at 14 months. He just started walking at like 13 months. and he falls and, banged his face. And of course you don't want them, when they're super little, you got to watch them. But in general, they have to learn to fall. They have to learn to get back up. They have to learn to get tough. You can't do everything for them all the time. They'll never reach their full potential, and so but I'm helping them. No, you're really not.
I get
let them
it.
tough it out.
Dan Martell had said something once that kind of still rings in my mind. He's like, take the small things like getting a haircut. I don't go in to help my kids get a haircut. I give them the $20 or $25, whatever it costs. We're not getting fancy haircuts. I don't know what it costs in California. So, but
dude, my wife just found our great clips for $14.99. We were just in San Francisco, and my son said he pays $45. I was like, I've never paid $45 for a haircut in my life.
Me
but
either.
Anyway,
but he gives them the money, and they're 8 years old, and he goes, "You take care of it." He sits in the car and does whatever he does. But
oh wow!
It's not because he's trying to be selfish. It's because those little steps toward independence are such a critical part of growth.
Yeah.
Letting them fall is another example of that. I mean, I know every entrepreneur, you've mentioned the money that you've lost and the decisions you've made that also shaped you to who you are today. You're successful because you've gone through that. You've overcome those challenges. If we avoided them, you wouldn't be the person that you are today.
Yeah, it's tough. Yeah.
And our kids are the same way, and our employees. I mean, there's a lot of commonality between being a really good parent and being a great leader. I think, right? Great leaders are supposed to empower their people to think for themselves, solve problems, pick up the pieces if it didn't work out, instead of crying to someone.
Yep.
You know what? When my son started jiu-jitsu, I really, he got hurt in tournaments and things like that. I didn't jump in. I just waited, and he was a beast out there. I love watching him just be independent, and that's what we're here to do as leaders, and these tough conversations are everywhere. I mean, I had one with my son the other day. He asked me a question. I thought it was one of the best questions he'd ever asked me, Wes. He said, "Hey, Dad, you said that you don't make a lot of money on books. How does the book change your business?" He sit down on the couch, and I thought we were going to have a real business conversation. We don't really have those things in our house. And as I started talking, he gets up and leaves the couch. And it went from, "That's the best question ever, I'm excited to talk to you about it," to, "Where the hell did you go?" And I probably did not do this well, but I said, when you ask someone, you need to be present with them. You need to look them in the eye. You don't need to be distracted on your phone or TV. You asked a great question. Thank you. But then you got up and left the room. He goes, "I can still hear you." And I'm like, "That's not the point. I'm here to show you that this is because if you do that in work, you know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Do it 2 or 3 times and go, this kid doesn't even know how to socially interact with people. But my hope is, back to the question, people will either download the free resources that we have, howtohavetoughconversations.com/gift, which is the frameworks that are in the book and a little bit of support around that. It's not the whole book. But if you want the book and you want everything kind of organized for you, you can get it at Amazon and Walmart.com and Goodreads and Barnes and Noble even.com. So that's my hope, Wes.
All right. Well, I'm linking to that as well. So let's do this more often than every 9.5 years, okay?
When are we going to roll?
Man, you probably travel more than me. If you come out here, we'll roll.
I know you don't travel as much.
I'll meet you in Baton Rouge or Mobile. I get out there. That's about as far east as I get typically.
Mobile's not very far. But I'd love to roll with you. I remember when you started, and you've really accelerated. I'm sure you're going a lot more regular than me. I think I saw you were going about 5 or 6 times a week.
Yeah, I go pretty much every day. We're closed on Sunday, so 5 or 6 days a week.
I would be going. We have a noon class here, but I'm here with you today instead of going to jiu-jitsu.
Well, we're done. It's noon your time. You can be a few minutes late. Let's go. Don't blame it on me. It's time to have a tough conversation. Why don't you prioritize your jiu-jitsu? You should have scheduled this earlier. What the hell were you thinking? Go.
This was for you because you rescheduled us today.
Oh, damn it. But you could have said, wrap it up, So, I mean, it's kind of.
I appreciate you having me on here. I've always looked up to you and the impact you've made. I did hire you before, so I just wanted to say that to everyone. It's incredible insight there. And, if you can deal with his humor, then you can deal with Wes. Because it's
Amen.
it's together. It's not, you can't separate those.
They are inseparable. Snark is my love language.
I agree with that. So thank you for having me on the show to talk about, how to have tough conversations. And, if anybody wanted to check out the work we do, coreelevation.com is the name of the company, but I really go by my name, genehammett.com. I'm happy to share more insights and give where you need help.
Yep. And I'm linking all that. So hit the show notes and go right to them. Well, Gene Hammett, all the way from Atlanta, man. Thanks for coming on the show. It's been great.
Thanks for having me, Wes.
Have a good one.